Some moments don't scream when they arrive. They don't come with warning signs or dramatic music. They slip quietly into your life and split it clean in two. That's how it happened for me. Not with a confession. Not with lipstick on a collar. Not with a late-night phone call, but with a purse. A stranger's purse, sitting in my husband's car. And the moment I picked it up, I knew my marriage was already over. Narration. BGINS. My name is Danielle Brooks. I was 41 years old when I learned that loyalty isn't proven by words, years, or shared history. It's proven by what someone does when they think you're not looking. I had been married to Marcus for 13 years. 13 years of routines, shared responsibilities, quiet evenings, inside jokes, and the kind of trust that comes from believing you truly know someone. We weren't perfect, but I believed we were honest. That belief died on a Thursday. Afternoon that day started like any other. Marcus left early for work, rushing out the door with his travel mug and that familiar half-kiss he always gave me when he was running late. "Love you," he said. "I love you too," I replied automatically. Without thinking, I had errands to run. Groceries, dry cleaning, a quick stop at the pharmacy. By mid-afternoon, I realized I had left my phone charger in his car the night before. We'd gone out to dinner, and I remembered plugging it in during the Dr. Marcus had parked in the driveway instead of the garage, something he'd been doing more often. Lately, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. It was hot, quiet, ordinary. Nothing about that moment felt important. Until I opened the passenger door. It was sitting right there on the floor. A small leather purse. Beige. Structured. Expensive looking. Not mine. I froze for a second. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe it belonged to a coworker. Maybe someone left it by mistake. Maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve my heart breaking. But deep down, before logic, before excuses, I already knew. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I opened it. Inside were things no married woman ever wants to see in her husband's car. A wallet with a woman's ID makeup, not cheap, carefully chosen. A small bottle of perfume, a set of keys, a folded receipt from a restaurant Marcus and I had never been to. Her name was Alyssa. She was younger than me, beautiful, and absolutely not part of my life. My hands started shaking, not violently, but enough that I had to sit down in the driver's seat just to breathe. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was evidence. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat there, in the quiet car, listening to the ticking sound of cooling metal, realizing something terrifying. Marcus hadn't been careless. He had been comfortable. Comfortable enough to let another woman leave her purse behind. Comfortable enough to believe I wouldn't. Check. Comfortable enough to assume I would accept whatever lie he decided to tell. That realization hurt more than the cheating itself. I carried the purse inside. Set it gently on the kitchen counter. Then I just stood there, staring at it like it might explain itself. Memories began lining up. Moments I had brushed off. Late meetings, business dinners, phone always face down. Sudden concern about his appearance. Distance I couldn't quite name. I saw them clearly now, not as coincidences, as choices. I didn't call a friend. I didn't Google signs of cheating. I didn't wait to hear his side, because I already knew the truth. And more importantly, I knew my boundary. Cheating was not something I negotiated. Not emotionally, not physically, not spiritually. When Marcus came home that evening, the sun was already setting. He walked in like nothing was wrong until he saw the purse. He stopped. His face changed. Not confusion, not surprise, fear that told me everything. "What is this?" I asked, calm in a way that surprised even me. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Danielle, I can explain." I held up my hand. "No," I said. "You don't get to explain." His eyes dropped. Silence filled the room, heavy, final. "I found it in your car," I continued, "which means you didn't even care enough to hide it." He started talking, excuses, apologies, phrases cheaters memorize. It didn't mean anything. It just happened. "I was going to tell you." I listened, and then I said the words that changed everything. "Pack a bag. You're leaving tonight?" He looked stunned. "You're throwing me out over this?" I met his eyes. "No," I said. "I'm throwing you out because cheating is not acceptable." Marcus left that night with a bag and a look on his face. I'll never forget the look of a man who truly believed he'd get away with it. What he didn't know was that finding that purse didn't just end my marriage, it woke up a version of me that would never tolerate disrespect again. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. After I threw him out, after the door slammed, after the house went silent, Adine just stood there in the hallway, barefoot, still holding that purse like it was evidence from a crime scene. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:47 a.m. I remember thinking how strange it was that time kept moving forward. When my entire world had just stopped, I placed the purse on the kitchen counter and sat down across from it. Like we were two people about to have a conversation. It was expensive. Real leather, clean, organized. This wasn't some careless flings bag tossed together without thought. This purse belonged to a woman who had a routine. A life confidence. Inside, there was a wallet. I didn't open it at first because part of me was still clinging to denial, that fragile, stupid hope that maybe there was an explanation that wouldn't destroy everything. But explanations are for people who haven't already crossed the line, and my husband had crossed it, eventually. I opened the wallet, a driver's license. A woman in her early 30s, soft smile, well-kept hair. An address only 15 minutes from our house. 15 minutes, that detail cut deeper than anything else. Not a stranger from another city. Not a random hotel hookup. Someone local. Someone close. Someone who existed comfortably in the same world I lived in. My hand started shaking. I checked the rest of the purse. Lipstick, keys, a small notebook, and tucked into one side pocket something that made my stomach drop. Folded receipt. Dinner, 2 entrees, wine, dessert, from a restaurant my husband and I used to go to on anniversaries. The date. 3 nights ago, the night he told me he was working late. I didn't cry. That's what shocked me the most. I felt clear, like something inside me had snapped into place. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't heartbreak. This was certainty. Cheating was not acceptable, not explainable, not forgivable, and I wasn't about to sit through lies just so he could feel better about himself. Around 3:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. His name lit up the screen. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say, something weak. Something apologetic, something that would center his emotions instead of my boundaries. So instead, I typed a message. I didn't send it, but I wrote it anyway. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and I'm choosing not to live with it. I deleted the message and put my phone face down. That was the first moment I felt powerful again. The sun came up, like nothing had happened. Birds chirped, neighbors left for work, the world continued. I made coffee out of habit. Then realized halfway through pouring it that my hands were trembling again, not from sadness, but from adrenaline, that this was real now. I had thrown my husband out, no dramatic planning, no backup strategy, no long conversations, just a line drawn in the sand. And now came the part nobody talks about. The aftermath, the logistics, the judgment, the questions. I checked my phone. 20-3 missed calls, dozens of messages, some apologizing, some defensive, some angry. One message stood out. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. That one made me laugh out loud. A sharp, bitter laugh that surprised even me, because it was exactly what I thought, and worse. By noon. My sister called, then my mother. Word travels fast when a marriage explodes overnight. I didn't give details. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I said one sentence. He cheated. I found proof. I'm done. Some people supported me immediately. Others hesitated. That hesitation, that's how you learn who expects women to tolerate disrespect. Quietly, my mother sighed and said, "Are you sure you're not acting too quickly?" I replied, "I acted exactly on time." Around 6 p.m. There was a knock at the door. I already knew it was him. I didn't open it right away. I let him stand there, let him feel even a fraction of the discomfort he'd handed me. When I finally opened the door, he looked different, smaller, defensive, less certain. He started talking immediately. "I can explain." I raised my hand. "No, you can leave." His face twisted. "You didn't even let me explain." I met his eyes calmly. "You left another woman's purse in your car." That was the explanation. He tried to minimize it, downplay it, blame stress, blame distance, blame me. That's when I said the sentence that ended everything. Cheating is not acceptable, and I don't negotiate my standards. Silence. Heavy. Final. He realized then that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a phase or a threat. This was a door closing. That night, after he left again for good this time, I sat alone on the couch. The house felt different, quieter, larger. Mine, and that's when the fear crept in. Not fear of losing him, fear of the unknown, of starting over, of explaining this story over and over, of being alone at an age when society tells women to hold on no matter what. I felt it. I acknowledged it. And then I did something radical. I chose myself anyway. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop. Not to stalk, not to cry, not to reread messages. I opened a blank document, and at the top I typed, "What does my life look like without betrayal in it?" I didn't have answers yet, but that question, That was the beginning of something much bigger than divorce. It was the beginning of my independence, my clarity, my future, and what I didn't know then was that finding that purse wasn't the worst thing that would happen to me. It was the thing that saved me, asterisk. When I locked the door behind him that night, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The house was silent in a way I had never experienced before. No television hum, no footsteps, no familiar sounds of a life I had shared for over a decade, just the ticking clock in the hallway and the faint buzz of the refrigerator. I stood there for a long time, my hand still resting on the lock, staring at the door like it might open again. Like he might knock and say this was all some terrible misunderstanding. He didn't. I walked slowly through the house, touching things that still felt like us. The couch where we used to argue about movies, the kitchen table where we planned vacations that never happened, the bedroom where I had once believed I was safe. And that's when the shaking started. My body finally caught up to what my mind had been holding back. My knees buckled and I slid down against the wall, clutching my arms around myself like I could keep everything from spilling out. I didn't cry right away. Shock does that to you. It freezes the tears somewhere deep inside. I remember thinking, this is what the end sounds like. Asterisk morning came. Whether I was ready or not, sunlight crept through the curtains, landing on the empty side of the bed. His pillow was still there, untouched. The faint outline of his body, still visible in the sheets. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I remembered the purse, the lies, the way his voice cracked when I confronted him. The calm I'd felt the night before was gone. In its place was a heavy, suffocating sadness, mixed with something sharper, anger. I checked my phone for missed calls. 7 messages all from him. Please let me explain. You're misunderstanding everything. I made a mistake. But it's not what you think. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I made coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the purse I had placed there the night before. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me was afraid of what I'd find, but another part of me, the part that had finally had enough, needed to know everything. Asterisk. I opened it slowly. Inside was a wallet, lipstick, a small bottle of perfume, receipts, normal things, but none of them belonged in my husband's car. I pulled out the wallet. Her driver's license slid out first. She was younger than me, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Bright smile, clear eyes, the kind of face that hadn't yet learned what betrayal felt like. Her name burned into my memory. I won't say it here, not because I'm protecting her, but because saying it out loud still makes my stomach twist. I flipped through the rest. There were handwritten notes folded carefully, movie ticket stubs, a keychain with initials that weren't mine. This wasn't casual. This wasn't accidental. This was a life he had been living alongside ours. And suddenly, all the little things I had ignored started lining up perfectly. The late nights, the work trips, the phone always face down, the emotional distance I'd blamed on stress. He hadn't been drifting away. He had been dividing himself. Asterisk. That afternoon, he showed up at the house. I hadn't invited him. He stood on the porch like a stranger, eyes tired, shoulders slumped, holding a small bag of clothes like proof that he didn't belong there anymore. I opened the door but didn't step aside. You can't just throw me out, he said quietly. I looked at him and realized something terrifying. I didn't recognize him anymore. You threw yourself out, I replied. The moment you decided cheating was something I'd tolerate. He tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to minimize. She didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. It didn't change how I feel about you. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insulting. You brought another woman into my life without my consent, I said. You don't get to decide what means something anymore. That's when the truth started spilling out, not because he wanted to confess, but because the lies were collapsing under their own weight. It had been going on for almost a year. A year, while I was planning anniversaries, while I was defending him to friends, while I was wondering what I was doing wrong. He cried, begged, promised therapy, promised change, promised anything he thought would keep the door from closing, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Asterisk. That afternoon, he showed up at the house. I hadn't invited him. He stood on the porch like a stranger, eyes tired, shoulders slumped, holding a small bag of clothes like proof that he didn't belong there anymore. I opened the door but didn't step aside. You can't just throw me out, he said quietly. I looked at him and realized something terrifying. I didn't recognize him anymore. You threw yourself out, I replied. The moment you decided cheating was something I'd tolerate. He tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to minimize. She didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. It didn't change how I feel about you. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insulting. You brought another woman into my life without my consent, I said. You don't get to decide what means something anymore. That's when the truth started spilling out, not because he wanted to confess, but because the lies were collapsing under their own weight. It had been going on for almost a year. A year, while I was planning anniversaries, while I was defending him to friends, while I was wondering what I was doing wrong. He cried, begged, promised therapy, promised change, promised anything he thought would keep the door from closing. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed. I started breathing differently, sleeping better, laughing, real laughter. Not the polite kind. I realized how much of myself I had shrunk to keep our marriage comfortable, how often I'd ignored my instincts to avoid conflict, how much emotional labor I'd been doing alone. Throwing him out wasn't just about cheating, it was about choosing myself for the first time in years, and that choice, as painful as it was, changed everything. Throwing him out felt powerful in the moment. It felt clean, decisive, almost cinematic. I shut the door behind him, locked it, leaned my back against it, and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, breathing like I'd just run miles. I remember thinking, that's it. I did the hardest part. I was wrong, because kicking your husband out is only the beginning. The real storm comes after, when the silence sets in, when the world finds out, when the practical pieces of life start falling apart one by one. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to the refrigerator hum, the ticking of the wall clock, the echo of my own thoughts. The house felt unfamiliar, like I was squatting in someone else's life. Every room held memories. The couch where we binge-watched shows, the kitchen table where we argued about money, the bedroom I couldn't even bring myself to enter. I slept on the couch, fully dressed, lights on. Because even though I'd done the right thing, I was terrified of what came next. The next morning, my phone exploded. Texts, calls missed. voicemails. From him, from his mother, from my sister, from people who had already heard a version of the story, and I hadn't even said a word yet. The first message from him was exactly what I expected. You're overreacting. We need to talk like adults. I didn't respond. The second message was colder. You embarrassed me last night. This didn't need to get ugly. That one hurt because it told me everything. He wasn't sorry. He was annoyed. By noon, his tone shifted. Please, I don't have anywhere to go. Can we talk tonight? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down and made coffee I didn't drink. By the afternoon, the calls started coming from other people. His mother left a voicemail that began with a sigh. I don't know what's gotten into you, but marriages have ups and downs. You don't throw someone out over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, that's what they always call it when it's not happening to them. My sister was more cautious. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, but are you sure you know the full story? That question hurt more than the accusations, because it meant doubt had already crept in. I realized something terrifying that day. When you expose betrayal, you don't just lose your partner. You lose the illusion that people will automatically be on your side. Everyone wants peace. Everyone wants normalcy. And if standing by you disrupts that, they hesitate. By the end of the week, reality hit me hard. Bills were due. Joint accounts were frozen while the bank reviewed activity. The car, the one I found the purse in, was technically in his name. Our mortgage payment was approaching, and my salary alone wouldn't cover it comfortably. I sat at the dining table with spreadsheets, bank apps open, calculators out, realizing something brutal. Even when someone cheats, you still pay the price. Emotionally, socially, financially, and no one prepares you for that. 2 weeks after I threw him out, I learned he'd started talking, not confessing, spinning, mutual. Friends began acting strange, distant, polite, in a way that felt rehearsed. One finally told me the truth. He says, you kicked him out over nothing? That you've been paranoid lately? That you embarrassed him? I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so predictable it hurt. Men like him don't see consequences as lessons, they see them as attacks, so they rewrite history to make themselves the victim. And suddenly, I wasn't the woman who stood up for herself. I was emotional, unstable, dramatic. Words that stick in people's minds longer than facts. I broke down in the grocery store. I was standing in the cereal aisle, staring at boxers I didn't need to buy for two anymore. When it hit me, this was my life now. No one to split errands with. No one to share decisions with. No one to lean on at the end of the day. I left my cart where it was and sat in my car, crying so hard I scared myself. Not because I missed him, but because I was grieving the life I thought I had. Grieving the version of myself who believed loyalty would be returned. Asterisk about a month later. My manager called me into her office. I assumed the worst. Instead, she surprised me. "I've noticed you've been different," she said carefully. I braced myself. But then she continued. "Sharper. More focused. More assertive. You're speaking up in meetings in a way you never used to." I didn't realize it. But she was right. Something had shifted when you stopped shrinking yourself to keep a marriage comfortable. You suddenly have energy again. She offered me a temporary leadership role on a struggling project team. More responsibility. More hours. More pressure. I said yes without hesitation. I needed something to rebuild me. 3 months after I threw him out. He showed up at my door, unannounced, thinner, tired, humbled, but not transformed. "I made a mistake," he said. "Not I cheated. Not I betrayed you, a mistake." I listened, quietly. He blamed stress, loneliness, miscommunication, everything except himself. When he finished, he looked at me like he expected relief, like I'd been holding my breath waiting for this moment. Instead, I felt, ".com? I didn't throw you out because of the purse," I said. He frowned. "I threw you out because when I asked you to explain, you lied, you minimized, you blamed me." He didn't argue. That told me everything. After he left. I stood in the doorway for a long time, and that's when I understood something I wish I'd learned years earlier. Cheating isn't always the moment someone crosses a physical line. Sometimes, it's the moment they decide your dignity is negotiable, and once that happens, love alone isn't enough. By the end of that year, my life looked nothing like it had before. I was financially tighter but mentally freer, lonelier but stronger, angrier but clearer, and without realizing it yet, I had laid the foundation for something bigger than survival, because Part 5 isn't about heartbreak, it's about rebuilding. Unexpected power, and the moment I realized throwing him out wasn't the end of my story. It was the first decision that truly belonged to me. There's a moment after betrayal that people don't talk about. It's not the shock, it's not the anger, it's not even the heartbreak, it's the quiet, that strange, hollow quiet that settles in after the door closes behind the person who shattered your life. That was the sound filling my house. The night I threw my husband out, no shouting anymore, no excuses, no lies tumbling over each other, just silence. And for the first time in years, it belonged to me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the front door like it might open again, like he might come back with a better lie, a stronger excuse, a version of the truth I could live with. But it didn't open. Instead, the sun rose, and with it came a clarity that surprised me. I expected regret. I expected fear. I expected loneliness to crash into me like a wave. But what I felt was something else. Relief, heavy, uncomfortable, but real. I walked into the garage that morning and looked at his empty parking spot. I opened the fridge and noticed how quiet the kitchen felt without his constant noise, sports radio, phone calls, complaints. I made coffee, sat at the table, and finally allowed myself to say it out loud. He cheated. Not whispered, not softened, not explained away, just stated, and once I said it plainly, everything else followed. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Him, his sister, our mutual friends, people who just wanted to understand, people who felt this was being handled too harshly, people who wanted me to be calm, rational, forgiving. Funny how quickly the burden of emotional maturity lands on the woman who was betrayed. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for a divorce attorney. That was the moment it became real. Not dramatic, not emotional, practical. And that's when I knew I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting out of self-respect. 3 days later, he showed up again, this time calmer, controlled, prepared. He stood on my porch like a man who had rehearsed. His apology in the mirror, he said it was a mistake. He said it didn't mean anything. He said he was stressed, confused, overwhelmed. Then, he said something that changed everything. It wasn't supposed to come out like this. Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Not, "I betrayed your trust." No, it wasn't supposed to come out. That's when I realized the purse wasn't the problem. The problem was that he believed I'd never find out, and worse, he believed I'd accept it if I did. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked him in the eye and said, "You don't get to explain betrayal. You only get to live with the consequences." Then I closed the door. Weeks later, I learned the truth. She wasn't a stranger. She was someone from his gym, someone he'd been helping, someone who knew about me. That detail hit harder than anything else. She knew. She knew he was married. She knew about our life. She knew about our home. And still she left her purse in his car, like a claim marker. A quiet declaration of presence. And for the first time, I understood something deeply uncomfortable. The betrayal wasn't just his, but my healing didn't require confronting her. It required outgrowing both of them. I didn't tell everyone right away. I didn't owe the world a press release. I told my closest friend, then my mother, then my therapist. Each time I said it, it felt lighter. Like setting down a weight I'd been carrying. For years, without realizing it, I changed the locks, I boxed up his things. I reclaimed spaces in my home that had shrunk around his presence. The guest room became my office. The garage became my gym. The silence became peace, and slowly, almost quietly, I began to remember who I was before I tried to make myself smaller to keep a marriage intact. Looking back. The signs were always there. The defensiveness, the secrecy, the way he framed loyalty like a burden. But love has a way of dulling your instincts. And marriage, sometimes, teaches women to negotiate their boundaries. Instead of enforcing them, finding that purse wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end of denial. And denial is far more dangerous than betrayal. Months passed, legal meetings, paperwork, uncomfortable conversations. But also long walks alone, quiet dinners, a sense of ownership over my life that I hadn't felt in years. People expected me to be bitter. I wasn't. I was awake, and that made all the difference. Finding another woman's purse in my husband's car didn't destroy my marriage. It revealed the truth about it, and throwing him out that same night wasn't impulsive, it was decisive. Because cheating isn't just about sex. It's about disrespect. It's about deception. It's about assuming someone will tolerate what they never agreed to, and I didn't. I chose myself, and I'd do it again every single time. The first morning after the divorce was final felt empty. Not sad, not liberating, just empty. I walked through my house and noticed the spaces he had occupied, literally and figuratively. The chair at the kitchen table where he used to leave his coffee mug, the side of the bed that had grown cold without him, the garage that had once smelled faintly of his cologne. All of it was gone. Yet, strangely, all of it remained. And then it hit me. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. Almost imperceptible. Until you wake up one day and realize you breathe differently. I didn't jump into a new relationship. I didn't overcompensate. Instead, I started with small things. I replaced his favorite mug with my own. I repainted the guest room into a bright, energizing office. I took long walks through the city streets alone, noticing details I'd never allowed myself to see before: how sunlight hit the buildings, how laughter echoed from playgrounds, how the air actually smelled in the morning. These were tiny acts, tiny rebellions, but each one reminded me, this life was mine. Months after the divorce, people started noticing changes, not the dramatic look at me now kind. The subtle ones. I walked taller. I spoke clearer. I smiled differently. I realized that betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had awakened something in me I didn't know existed: a deep, unshakable self-respect. I didn't need validation from him or anyone else. I didn't need to justify my decision. I simply existed in the clarity of knowing my worth. Part of the healing process was remembering who I had been before all the compromises. I enrolled in a pottery class I'd always wanted to try. I spent weekends at coffee shops, journaling and writing my thoughts without fear of judgment. I traveled alone, even if just for a night. 2 cities I'd always wanted to explore. And every time I did something for myself, I felt lighter. Not because I had escaped him, but because I had found me. I used to think strength was about endurance, about holding on. Now I know strength is about letting go. Letting go of the lie that someone else's betrayal defines your value. Letting go of the expectation that love must include sacrifice of your dignity. Letting go of the fear of being alone. Strength is quiet, invisible, subtle, yet unstoppable. I began writing again, not professionally at first, just thoughts, observations, stories from my life. And I realized something profound. My voice, silenced for so long by compromise and tolerance, was back-end. It was stronger than ever. I started dreaming bigger. Not just surviving, not just coping, but creating a life where betrayal wasn't a shadow in my home, where trust, respect, and love first for myself were non-negotiable. Looking back, that purse in Marcus's car wasn't just a symbol of his infidelity. It was a doorway to the version of me that refused to shrink, the version that refused to negotiate respect, the version that would never allow betrayal to define her life. And I stepped through it. I don't just survive my past, I use it. I don't just walk away from betrayal, I rise above it. And that, more than anything, is what I learned. You can lose someone who doesn't value you, and still gain the most important thing of all: yourself.